I never imagined I'd get a phone call that would make my heart stop, but that's exactly what happened the afternoon. My daughter's voice was shaking, barely holding together, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Dad, there are 3 cops at the door, and they're yelling at me." Except something felt wrong immediately. She kept saying they didn't look like real police. No marked car, no proper uniforms. Just badges and attitude. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about rules anymore. This was about someone trying to scare a child. Before I go any further, if you like real stories where entitled people cross a line and instantly regret it, make sure you like this video and subscribe. It helps Karen Stories Daily reach more people who enjoy true HOA and entitlement stories like this one. Now let me explain how we even got here. We live in a quiet HOA neighborhood, a kind that looks perfect from the outside. Clean lawns, matching mailboxes, and a rule for everything. I'm not on the HOA board, never wanted to be. I pay my dues, follow the basics, and keep to myself. My daughter is a teenager, quiet, responsible, and usually home alone for a couple of hours after school until I get back from work. The problem started over something small, really small, a basketball hoop. The HOA had sent me notices saying the hoop in our driveway was temporarily visible from the street and violated community standards. I pushed it back when I could, but sometimes my daughter would forget. We got fined once. Then again, I emailed asking for clarity. No response. I appealed. Denied. The HOA president didn't like that I questioned anything. She had that tone in her emails, the kind that sounds polite but feels threatening. She reminded me she had authority to enforce compliance and that continued violations would lead to escalation. I didn't think much of it. I figured escalation meant more fines or another letter. I was wrong. That day, I was still at work when my daughter got home. She texted me like normal, said she was inside, homework started, everything fine. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. She said 3 men showed up, claiming to be HOA security. They were wearing dark outfits, boots, fake-looking badges clipped to their belts. They told her she was in violation of HOA rules and demanded she open the door. She didn't. Thank God she didn't. She told them her parents weren't home. One of them raised his voice and said if she didn't cooperate, things would get worse. Another one said they could force compliance. That's when she locked herself in her room and called me. I told her to hang up and call 911 immediately. Then I left work without even telling my boss what was going on. While I was driving, she texted me updates. The men were still outside, walking around the house, looking in windows, knocking harder. 3 minutes. That's all it took for everything to fall apart for them, because the moment real police were dispatched, those fake HOA cops had no idea what was coming, and neither did the HOA president who sent them. The moment I pulled into the neighborhood, I could already feel something was off. 2 of the 3 men were pacing near my driveway, trying to look official, but their confidence was gone. One of them kept checking his phone like he was waiting for instructions that weren't coming. The third was standing closer to the street, scanning for cars, clearly nervous. That's when I saw my daughter's bedroom light flicker. She was safe, but terrified, watching all of this unfold from behind locked doors. I parked a little down the street and stayed in my car. I didn't want to confront them directly yet. I wanted to see how far they'd take this. And more importantly, I knew the real police were already on their way because my daughter had stayed on the line with dispatch just long enough to give details. The dispatcher told her to stay hidden and said officers were responding fast. One of the men suddenly walked up to my front door again and started banging harder than before. Not knocking, banging, yelling that this was her last warning. That was the moment something snapped inside me. No rule, no HOA fine, no entitled neighbor gives anyone the right to threaten a child. I stepped out of my car and started walking toward them, calm, slow, phone already recording in my hand. I asked them, clearly and loudly, to identify themselves. All 3 turned toward me at once. The one in the middle stepped forward and said they were authorized HOA enforcement officers. I asked which department they worked for. He dodged the question. I asked for badge numbers. He pointed to a cheap metal badge with no name, No number, nothing official. I told them they were impersonating law enforcement and needed to leave immediately. That's when the HOA president arrived. She pulled up like she owned the street, parked sideways, got out with her arms crossed, and that smug smile I'd seen in her emails. She said she was there to ensure compliance, and that I was being difficult as usual. She claimed these men were contracted security and fully within their rights to check the property. I asked her directly if she had sent them knowing a minor was home alone. She hesitated. That hesitation lasted less than a second, but it was enough. Right then, red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. Everything changed instantly. The fake cops froze. One of them whispered something like, "We need to go." Another tried to casually step away. Too late. Two real police cruisers rolled up fast and blocked both ends of the street. Officers stepped out, hands already resting near their belts, eyes locked on the scene. The lead officer asked what was going on. Before the HOA president could speak, my daughter opened a window upstairs and shouted, "Those men threatened me." That single sentence cut through everything. The officers separated everyone immediately. One officer came straight to me and asked if my daughter was safe. Another pulled the three men aside. A third started questioning the HOA president. Within minutes, the truth started spilling out. The men admitted they weren't police. They weren't licensed security. They were just friends of the HOA helping enforce rules. One of them even said they'd done this before in other neighborhoods. The officer's face went cold. Impersonating law enforcement. Trespassing. Harassment of a minor. Those words started getting said out loud. The kind of words that don't end with a warning. The HOA president tried to interrupt, saying she never told him to scare anyone, only to send a message. The officer asked her what kind of message requires 3 grown men to surround a house with a child inside. She didn't answer. They put the 3 men in handcuffs right there on the street. Neighbors started coming out of their houses, phones out, whispering. The image of those so-called HOA cops standing cuffed on the curb spread fast. One officer asked me if I wanted to press charges. I didn't even hesitate. And that's when things started getting much worse for the HOA president herself. By the time they finished putting the cuffs on the 3 fake HOA cops, the entire street looked different. Porch lights were on. Curtains were pulled back. People who had ignored every HOA meeting for years were suddenly very interested in what was happening. Fear has a way of waking people up. An officer asked me to bring my daughter outside. When she stepped out, wrapped in a hoodie, still shaking, the mood shifted again. One of the officers knelt to her level and spoke calmly, telling her she did the right thing by calling 911. She nodded, trying to be brave, but her hands were trembling. Seeing that made my chest tighten in a way I'll never forget. The HOA president tried one last move. She walked over and said this was all a misunderstanding, that everyone was overreacting, and that maybe we could handle this internally instead of making a scene. The officer stopped her mid-sentence and asked for her ID. Then he asked her to explain, very slowly, why she authorized unlicensed individuals to pose as enforcement officers and intimidate a resident, knowing a minor was alone inside. She started backpedaling fast. Emails were mentioned, text messages, recorded calls. She claimed she didn't know they would show up at night. One of the handcuffed men immediately said, "You told us to go when she'd be alone." "You said that." Silence. That was the moment her authority evaporated. No raised voice. No smug smile. Just a pale face and wide eyes as she realized this wasn't an HOA issue anymore. This was criminal. The officers asked me again if I wanted to press charges. Not just against the men, but against her as well. I said yes, without hesitation. And I told them I wanted a restraining order too. They took statements on the spot. My daughter told her side. I showed the recording on my phone. Neighbors started offering their own stories. One woman said the HOA president had sent men to her house before. Another said she'd been threatened with fines and visits for questioning budgets. It was like a dam broke. Before the police left, the HOA president was told very clearly not to contact me or my family again. She wasn't arrested that night, but the look on her face said she knew what was coming. The next morning, everything exploded. By noon, the story had spread through the neighborhood group chats. By evening, People were demanding an emergency HOA meeting. Someone leaked screenshots of the HOA president's messages coordinating the visit. Someone else shared body cam clips once they were publicly available. Karen Stories Daily could not have written a better example of what unchecked power does to people. The emergency meeting was chaos. Residents showed up furious, some crying, some shouting. The board members tried to control the room, but they couldn't. When the HOA president walked in, the room went dead silent. No applause, no support, just cold stares. She tried to speak. She never got past the first sentence. A vote of no confidence was called right there. She was removed on the spot. Another board member resigned immediately after. An audit was demanded. Lawyers were mentioned. Police reports were passed around. Within weeks, the HOA's entire enforcement structure was dismantled. No more security, no more surprise visits. New bylaws were written. Transparency became mandatory. And most importantly, residents finally realized they had more power together than one bully with a clipboard. As for the fake HOA cops, 2 took plea deals. 1 went to court and lost. Impersonation charges stuck. Records were made. Consequences followed. My daughter sleeps peacefully now. She still double-checks locks sometimes, but she knows she was brave. She knows her voice mattered, and she knows no one gets to scare her in her own home ever again. If this story made you angry or reminded you of someone abusing power, share it, talk about it, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my place. Stories like this only change things when people refuse to stay silent.